us are the bride, and we see this through Scripture. In Isaiah, when the people of Israel are described as being espoused to a heavenly bridegroom, right? So we're all called to this being totally given and receiving from God everything that we need for our life, for our happiness. And you might be wondering, well, how exactly do you give everything to God? And that's what these men and women were trying to figure out, right? If I'm not going to give my life literally by dying, then what's the closest, right? So what's the closest I can get to dying for Jesus without being martyred? And so over a couple hundred years, there developed this tradition of the evangelical councils. So we might already know about this. So they're councils because they are recommended, but they're not commandments. So our life is not commanded, right? It's something that Jesus invites certain people to. And then they say yes. So the evangelical councils are poverty, chastity, and obedience. Now, all of us are called to those virtues, right? We're all called to the virtue of poverty, especially poverty of spirit. Right? We're all called to chastity in our state of life. And we're all called to obedience in various different ways. But for the religious man or woman, we take those vows and we make them as extreme and as radical as possible. So everyone is called to poverty of spirit. The religious is called to a more literal poverty. So not owning anything for myself. And whatever I have, whatever I need, comes to me through my community. So that's, and I don't earn money for myself. I don't have money at my disposal. And every community will live poverty a little differently. Every different religious family will have a different way to live that. But fundamentally, it's like stuff is not mine. Stuff is not mine. So the books that I have, the rosary that I wear, like when I die, somebody else is going to get this rosary. Another sister, right? So when we first get the habit, we get to pick our rosary. At the time, I wasn't really aware of like picking, so I just grabbed one that was long enough, anyways. And then I was like, oh, that's pretty long. That's too late. I know it's funny. You're not supposed to have those preferences, but then sometimes you still do. So everything that I have is for my use, to use for God's kingdom, but it's not mine. And it's also all a gift. Right, so I can't really say, well, I have this because I earned it. And I have this because God is taking care of me through my religious community. So that's a little bit about the virtue of poverty and the vow of poverty as religious live it. And then the vow of chastity. So again, everyone is called to the virtue of chastity throughout their life. But for the religious, we take a vow that's called perfect chastity. So that means that we will never be given to another person in the way that a husband and wife are. Right, so our body, our fertility, that entire gift that each human person has, that they can choose to give to another person, we choose to vow to give it to no person, that gift of ourselves, our body, our souls, only to God. Right, so when we first make our profession and we receive the veil, we sing, the sisters sing this song, like that we wear the veil as a sign that we will admit no other lover. So Jesus is our only and our always one. He is the King of our hearts. He is the fulfillment of all of our desires, and we actually choose to not look for any human person for that love. We choose that in order for him to be everything. And it's the same thing for a religious man. Obviously, like I don't have that perspective, so mine is going to be from the feminine side. But to give that capacity, which is a great gift. So a thing to remember about religious life is we're not giving up property and marriage and family life because those are sinful or bad. We're giving them up for the best things that we can give. Right, so if we want to give everything to God, we want to give him the greatest and the highest and the most beautiful gifts that he has created and given to us. So the right to work hard and have the fruits of your labor, right? We give that up in poverty. The right to join yourself to a spouse and have children, we give that up through chastity. And then finally, we take a vow of obedience. And what that means is that we don't only owe obedience to God and to, civil authorities, maybe our employer, but we also owe obedience to a religious superior who will assign us to go and to do what she decides, and then we'll go and do it. And that obedience covers the big things of our life, like Sister Elizabeth Marie, you're going to preside at Catholic high school, and then I'm going, and I've never been, I've been to Texas, but never been to Houston before, and then I'm leaving the place where I was. So that's happened to me lots of times, and it's always both painful and beautiful, because there's a sense in which I'm like, well, my life is not my own. And so I don't decide where I go, what I do, how I use the time that I'm given. Obviously there's times when I make a choice of how I use my time, but in the end, it's not my time. So this happened when I was in the novitiate, so that's the first couple of years of religious life. A sister got up in the morning, and Mother said, Sister Mary Joseph was there at the time too, I think, right? Sister Mary Bethany.
I was out of the
So Mother said, Sister Mary Bethany, we need you to go to Minnesota because they need a teacher.
She was actually out of school teaching, and she was called out of her classroom.
Yeah, and we need you to go today to Minnesota. So she got up in the morning, not, just thinking she was going to school, having a normal day, and then she's on a flight to Minnesota a few hours later. The sisters that were in her group were like, where's Sister? Oh, she's in Minnesota. So literally, that's how available we are to God's will. That at, top of a hat, we can be sent anywhere. Now, on a smaller scale, we can be told, oh, sisters, we're going to do this tonight. We're going, we're going to go to the basketball game, or we're going to go to this holy hour that's happening. And it might be that I don't really feel like that, right? But I made a vow of obedience. And so I go trusting that God's will is at work through that vow. Okay, so that's the beauty of the vows, is that when we give up our rights, when we give up these great gifts that God has given, then God takes that gift and he does amazing things with it that we would never expect, and that would never happen through our own choice, right? So if I ran my life, there are lots of things that never would have happened. And because of my vows, I can trust that God is actually working in my life through the vows, through the religious superior, who might not be holy, who I might not like, right? So I don't obey because I think this person is really great. Usually I do, right? But I obey because I told God that I would, and that I would obey whenever I was asked, right? And and we're not poor. I'm not poor because I'm like, yeah, I just want to live a simple life, like minimalism. It's not actually that, right? Okay, now, living a simple life is good, but that's not why I live poverty. I live poverty because Christ was poor, right? Because Christ was poor. His mother was poor, right? And because I want him to be my only treasure of my heart and of my life, right? And I don't live chastity because I'm like, oh, So sometimes people, I'm a little bit windy here, but sometimes people think when they meet sisters, oh, do you just not like men? or do you not like kids? And I'm like, oh my gosh. No, right? This is not I couldn't find a good boyfriend option. It's not what it is, right? And honestly, when women come to me and they say, I'm just fed up with men, I think I'm going to be a sister, I'm like, please don't. That is not, don't want religious men and women who are afraid or aren't attracted to the married life, because that means they're not very human. Honestly, right? So it wouldn't be a gift to God if it weren't if it weren't the natural desire of every heart. So because it's the natural desire, that's why it's a gift. That's why it's a sacrifice. Right? And again, we're chaste because Christ was chaste. Because Christ was totally given to his Father, but then totally given to all of us. Right? And we're obedient because Christ was obedient to his Father and to civil authorities and to Mary and Joseph. So again, he was obedient to people who were imperfect, in the case of St. Joseph and other civil authorities. Mary was perfect, but the other ones he was obedient to. So we try to, through our vows, we actually do make a holocaust of our life. So everything in our life is burnt up as a burnt offering to him. And then he gives us to his church. He gives us to his church to be of service in whatever way he sees fit. So that's a little summary of religious life. And then how would it be that, if someone's called to religious life or wants to figure out if they might be, what are some ways they can do that? So practically speaking, I want to just go through a few tips for discerning specifically religious life. And just also to invite you, if you haven't opened your heart to the fact that God could be calling you to religious life, I'm going to invite you to do that. It's a really scary thing to do, especially if, like me, you have never thought about that, and you always have been planning your wedding since you were 5, and this is what girls do. I don't know about So it's a hard thing to think that my life might be so different from what I've always imagined. That's a scary thing. But I would invite you to consider asking God and really opening your heart, because he will not disappoint you. He will not disappoint you. So many times in my life I've seen, I'm so grateful to God that he took me on this unexpected path that I'm on. And that this is the way he is going to draw me to heaven and hopefully draw lots of other people along with me. So I'm going to read a scripture verse as far as how to, a couple of verses about how to discern. The first one is from the book of the prophet Hosea. And this is a verse that's read a lot at profession masses when we make our vows. So this is the Lord speaking. So I will allure her. I will lead her into the desert and speak to her heart. So the desert is important in religious life, that image of the desert. So one of the most important things to do to know God's will in general, but specifically for religious life, is to have a little desert in your heart where you can go and be with God. And it's also helpful to have some sort of space where you can be quiet and still, at least for a few minutes each day. Right? And if you don't have that, you can ask your parents, is there a place and a time when I can have 5 minutes where I'm totally alone, where it's really quiet, where there aren't any screens? It's super important, no screens. And then maybe you already have that time, and then maybe you can expand it a little bit. But you could start, if you don't have that, you can start with 5 minutes. Sometimes you could go to the church if the church is open. You could go to adoration. For me and for many sisters that I know, adoration was really where the Lord called us, was when you were in the quiet with him. So in order to hear God's voice, we need to be quiet, and we need to be still, and we need to find a place of peace so that we can hear his voice. There's a lot of voices, right? So in order to hear his, we have to go into the desert at least a little bit each day. So prayer, in lots of different forms, is the way to discern, right? You have to be a praying person if God is going to invite you. And for me, I was not actually a praying person very much when a few people started asking me if I thought about being a sister. I mean, I would go to mass on Sunday, but I didn't go to adoration. But when they asked me, and when I couldn't get it out of my head, I went to a friend, and this was in college, and I was like, oh, this seminarian asked me if I wanted to be a sister, but I don't want to be a sister. But I kind of feel like I'm supposed to think about this. And she said, well, yes, I would say you are supposed to think about it. And she said, you need to pray every day and seek God's will. So prayer is really important, praying with your family, but also your own personal relationship with Jesus. Because this is a personal vocation that he might be inviting you to. So you need to pray. And then the other part of my story is my friend, right? So you also need to have really good friends. And you need to have a couple really close friends of the same sex who you can really share your heart with. So for me, like, my friends were essential in my discernment. Because my parents, they had a really hard time with the idea of me being a sister, so my friends were the ones that helped me through that journey. But then you also want to have a larger group of boys and girls, men and women that you're friends with, right? Because we want happy, normal, human people to be sisters and brothers, right? So you need to learn how to relate to the opposite sex. You need to have those healthy friendships. Those are also really important. Friendships where you can have fun together, where you can pray together, where you can talk about important things together. All of these things that I'm saying, like, these are things that will help you whatever your vocation is, right? So I'll start out with general and then we'll get to more specific. So have a life of prayer, have a life of really good friendships, have a sacramental life, right? So going to mass, going to confession regularly is going to be super important, right? Because we can't discern if there's all kinds of like garbage around, like cluttering things up, right? So we need to go, like once a month, every couple of weeks to clean out so that we can hear the Lord. So those are some things that everybody can do. Another thing would be to really look at the role of technology in your life. The students who are Apostolic Catholic will know this is a frequent topic that we talk about, that we bring up. But if your phone or an iPad or Netflix is a major part of your life, and how you use your free time, or video games, this is a bold thing to say, but it's going to be, if that's a major part of your life, it's going to be really hard for you to hear God's voice and hear what he wants to say. So if you have that, if that's a major part of your life, if it's your go-to, right? If it's your go-to when you're bored, if it's your go-to when you're alone, ask someone for help. Ask your parents, ask your friends, so that you can find a new way to use your time that will really feed your body and your soul. Right? It doesn't need to be that you're always praying. I don't mean to say like you can never do anything else, but there's lots of studies, right? The technology, the screens are really generally not feeding our souls. Okay. So find like tonight, I didn't see anybody on their phone. So delightful, right? We're all just here together. We're present with each other. And that's part of being friends with other human beings, but it's also part of being friends with God. It's really being where I am and being open and available. And if you're somebody who has a technology addiction, or somebody in your family does, you know that someone in front of a screen is the opposite of open and available, right? They're like, hello, right? Okay. So if you can think about God is kind of like that, like, hello, hey. So if that's something that you struggle with, and honestly, if I were not a sister, I would, right? We don't have cell phones of our own, so I have that gift. But if I had a cell phone, I would have the same struggles that maybe some of you do. So just ask someone for help to set some boundaries in your life, especially before you go to bed. Anyways, I'm not talking about this, but especially before you go to bed. Like, if you can have no screens in your bedroom, ask your parents. Like, I can't, maybe you can't do it on your own, right? Like, Mom and Dad, an hour before I go to bed, can I give you my phone? They'd be like, oh my God. So that you can have that time to really be open and available to your siblings, to your family, but also to God. You'll sleep better as well. Sleeping is also a good thing to do, to be open to God's will. I'm serious. I'm serious. Like, if you're always tired and cranky, like, it's hard to be open to anybody, right? So sleep is an important thing. And I know teenagers don't do a lot of sleeping, so you need to sleep. Yeah, you need to sleep. You need to eat healthy food. We need to take care of our bodies, right, in order to get ourselves to God. All right, then what about if you're doing all of this, right, and you're thinking that maybe God is calling me to be a religious sister or brother. At a certain age, you can start actually moving in the direction of figuring that out in a very practical way. So if you are, say, 16 or 17, that's the age when you can start talking to vocation directors of communities. So most religious communities, men and women, they have a website. So you can, if you don't know a community that you're interested in already, then you can go and look and find their phone number or find an email and say, hey, can I talk to you? Or can I come and visit? So the only way to know whether you're called to religious life is to visit a religious house. So a priory, a convent, a place where religious men and women live and work and pray. So if you're a little older and you're open to considering it in that way, and you think it's possible God could be inviting you, then that's when you want to start taking that step. You don't want to take that step when you're 14 or 15 because it's so far off from the time when you could actually enter, right? So it's kind of like starting a super serious relationship when you're 14. It's like, what's going to happen, right? It's like, there's a long time until you could actually take action and get married. So it's the same thing with religious life. So most communities, like our community, you can enter when you're 17. Maybe 18? I forget. You can visit the mother house when you're 17. You can enter when you're 18, normally. And I graduated from high school. So that's why 16 or 17 is a really great time to start talking to vocation directors of communities, which is the brother or sister whose responsibility it is to help people figure it out if God is calling them, and then to start visiting. So for me, when I was in that religious life, when I got more serious in that journey, I actually had a spiritual director, which is another thing that you can do. So when you're a little older, you might ask a priest to start meeting with him, and he can help you in your spiritual life and help you to figure out what your vocation might be. So I had a priest who did that for me, and at a certain point he said, you need to start visiting convents, right? Because discernment is not supposed to be a vocation, because it's not one, right? It's figuring out what God wants and then saying yes to it once you know, right? So it's not supposed to be a little super long process. Just like it's not good to date forever, it's not good to discern forever, okay? So he told me, you start visiting. So I visited a couple of convents. At our community, we offer different kinds of retreats, people who are just looking, people who are more serious. And it was really when I visited that I knew that I was supposed to be a sister, and I was supposed to be a Dominican Sister of St. Cecilia. Then you start an application process, and that's when the community gives you feedback, right? So discernment is not just you and God, but eventually it's you and God and a particular community. So then they'll help you by either saying, yes, we think that God is calling you here, come, wear these weird clothes and do this new thing, right? Or they might say, I don't think you're ready yet. So go back to college or go get a job. Or they might say, I really don't think, this is your vocation, at least not to our community. And all of that is a way that God helps us to figure out whether we're called. So those are a few practical tips. And I just wanted to close my talk, and then we'll have questions, with a support from the very end of the Bible. And it always speaks to me because God calls people not only for their sake. Right? So he doesn't just call us so that we can be holy, although that's the primary goal. Like, if we're not holy, then the whole thing is a waste, right? But he also calls us for the sake of others. So at the end of Revelation, God is calling all of his people to himself, right? But what's interesting is that it's not just God who is calling. So here's the quote. "The Spirit and the bride say, 'Come.' Let the hearer say, 'Come.' Let the one who thirsts come forward, and the one who wants it receive the gift of life-giving water." So religious life, like religious men and women, are the bride who join with the Spirit in calling everyone to God. So that everyone who sees us, everyone who meets us, hears the Spirit and the bride say, "Come. If you're thirsty, come. Come drink the life-giving water that is always available to us." So we are called to be set apart, to be that voice of the bride with the Spirit saying, "We're all made to belong to God. Let's go. Let's go together." So that's our vocation, and that's a little bit of how to figure it out. So then if you have questions, I will try to answer them about religious life or my community in particular, or how to discern. Yes, I'm happy to answer. Yes.
You were saying that it's important to go and have quiet time each day. What do you do?
What do you do during quiet time? Great question. So a first step, to be honest, is and there's lots of different ways to do this. There's not just one way. A really great way would be to bring your Bible with you and just read a few verses of scripture in that time, and just kind of read it several times, puzzle over it, think about it, ask God about it, ask God, what are you saying to my heart through this? I really recommend the Psalms for that. So for me, when I was in high school, the Psalms were the first book of the Bible that I read, and they're really, as y'all would say, relatable. They're very relatable because they're human prayers that were also inspired by God. So it's like God gave us the words to use to talk to him. When we're sad, when we're angry, when we're lonely, when we feel abandoned, when we're joyful, when we're on top of the world, it's all there. And it's also helpful because religious, in our prayer, we pray the Psalms every day. So it's also it has a connection to religious life. So I would do that. You could also find a little booklet that would have little prayers for you to pray every day. You could pray the Divine Office. That would be a harder thing to do, but you could ask for help. Another thing that I ask my students to do sometimes is literally just sit for 5 minutes without a book, without anything like scheduled, and just sit. Like maybe go outside somewhere, and just, okay, God, just let me be in your presence. Let me just be. Let me be in my own presence. Right? And then if that's really hard for you, then you know you need to do it more. Okay, then you know that, I need to find more quiet and silence in my life so that I'm comfortable just being, right? And this is part of the technology thing. Like most of us who are older in this room, like we've had, like our lives were filled with those moments. Like you're in line for something and you're just standing there. Here I am, just standing here. You're at the stoplight, right? You're just sitting there. But now we fill that with stuff, right? We fill it with music, we fill it with our phone, but you don't have to. There's all these little moments that you can take. Like when I'm at stoplights, I like to pray for everybody who's going through the intersection. And I kind of like see their faces and I just think, they have a whole life. Like this little person that just drove by me, like, Like, they have a whole life journey that they're on. Like, where are they? I don't know, but God knows, you know? And just, and bless them in that moment of their life. So there's all kinds of little ways when you can work that in, but the most important part is just to do it. To not worry about doing it right, but just to do it. And you can talk to your friends like, hey, what are you doing in your 5 minutes? Right? Like you can encourage each other and like to be faithful to that. Like, are we gonna move to 10? Should we move to 10? You know? Like if you think about time you spend doing other things, like, you can do it. Anyways. Other questions? If you're afraid, I'm a teacher. I've had like every possible question. Okay. Yeah.
What if your superior told you to do something simple?
Oh, then I wouldn't do it. So she asked if like a superior asked me to do something simple. So the vow of obedience does not oblige me to obey my superior if my superior asks me to sin or do something that's against God's law or the natural law, right? So this is actually a philosophical principle. It's not a law if it's against nature or against God. So it doesn't bind, right? Mm-hmm. Ethics. Okay. So, yes. So we wouldn't have to obey. But the good thing is that the superior is also not a despot. So like they don't just like, what should we do today? Right. So, but we have what's called a constitution that guides our life. So the superior is bound to follow that and to help us in living the life that has been written down for us to live. And that's actually like canon law. So like our life is ecclesial, right? So the Vatican has to approve those constitutions for us to live by. So it's not just our little like club, if that makes sense. Yeah. Other questions? Yes.
When you were talking about the vow of poverty,
Yes.
You mentioned being poor in spirit. Can you explain that? And then how has religious life helped you to
Be poor in spirit.
be poor in spirit?
That's a great question. So poverty of spirit, right? It's one of the Beatitudes, right, that we're all called to. So poverty is a lack, right? So it's this idea that I don't have something, right? There's something missing in my life. And poverty can be a bad thing, right? Like we don't want people to be missing what they need to live a happy and flourishing life. But poverty of spirit is when I realize that I don't actually have what it takes to be happy, to be successful, to be holy on my own. I don't have it. So poverty of spirit is when I realize that, I accept it, and I actually find joy in my poverty, in my dependence. So when I realize, like St. Paul, like the thorn in the flesh, I can't overcome it. So poverty of spirit is like, of course I can't overcome it, because I'm so small, and I'm so simple, and when I do things on my own, they turn into a mess. But I don't have to do it on my own. I wasn't created to do things on my own. I was created to do things in cooperation, in participation with the Trinity. I was created, and in my baptism, given the ability to live my life in communion with the Trinity. And so my poverty is actually what draws me to Him, right? So if I'm poor in spirit, I'm not upset by that. If I'm not poor in spirit, then I start grasping for things to make me okay, right? So I start looking for ways to be okay. Well, I'm okay because I'm really good at piano, or I'm okay because I'm really smart, or I'm okay because I'm really strong, or I'm okay because I'm really friendly and everybody likes me, or I had this many likes on Instagram, but I'm okay now. I've got the stuff that makes me okay. Poverty of spirit is that I have nothing, and I'm okay because God has me. And honestly, I'm still on that journey, for sure. but there have been so many times in my life, like one in particular that I think of is I had a really hard change in assignment where it was kind of sudden. It was not the normal time when you're changed, and I was changed from a school where my sister was a teacher. So for 1 year we taught the same school, which when you enter religious life, you give up the ordinary communication with your family. You don't communicate with them in the way that you did before. So it was like this huge gift to have my sister at my school. But what happened was like that we were able to have this relationship that we hadn't been able to have. And then, in June, I got a phone call from Mother saying, I need you to go to Birmingham, Alabama. And I had been told I was going to come back to that same school. And so that was super painful. Not only was it my sister, but I loved the school where I was. It was like the happiest I had been on a natural level. And I thought I was doing a great job. And then I had to go and tell my sister, I'm leaving in 2 days, and I'm not coming back. And that was really painful for me. But I remember this moment of like, this is what I came for. I came to be emptied in this way. I came to give what's sometimes painful to give. And so that was a bigger moment, but there's all kinds of moments when we face our frailty, right? When I realized I messed up that lesson because I made it about me. Because I think I'm so funny and I think I'm so smart, and I got to the end of that lesson and the kids didn't learn anything, and that was because of me and my weakness and my sinfulness. Oh, I'm the kind of person that does that? No, I'm not. I can't believe this. That wasn't me. Yes, it was. Right? Yes, it was, because I am poor and I can't do things well on my own. So the more I have to keep. I'm still working on that, for me at least, in my journey. Like being at peace with the fact that that I'm not going to be able to do the amazing things that I think I should on my own. And that even with God, I might still externally look like a mess, right? There are lots of saints who the world looked at and I'm like, who is this loser, right? But God was like, he's my loser, right? He's my loser. Really, it's true. And so poverty of spirit means being okay with being God's loser, Yeah. Other questions?
I just want to interject that Sister and I were assigned to Birmingham together that same year. We became very good friends.
That is true.
It was the only year I was there. So.
That's true. So if I hadn't been that, and when I got to Birmingham, it was so, I literally felt like I was walking and God was holding his hands under my feet, because I was I don't know what I'm doing, this is super different culture, I was in Baltimore, I went to Birmingham. Super different culture, and I was teaching things I hadn't taught, and I was teaching boys for the first time, and I had been to all-girls school. There were lots of things that were new and hard, but it was really filled with joy because I was not doing my will, wasn't doing my way. Yes. Other questions? That was a really great question. I enjoyed answering it. Anything about religious life? Would you like to know about a day in the life of a sister? That might be interesting. I don't want to keep you for too long. So, for Dominican Sisters of St. Cecilia, we live what's called a monastic life. So we live a little bit like monks and nuns. And what that means is that we have times and places of silence. And we have a regular schedule that we follow each day. So obviously there's flexibility, like we're here tonight, for example. But normally we get up at 5 and we go to the chapel. Because all of our convents where we live have chapels with Jesus and the Blessed Sacrament. So we go to the chapel at 5:30. and we have silent meditation for half an hour. Then we chant lauds, which is morning prayer. So most of our prayers together, we actually sing. So, and we face each other choir to choir, if you've ever seen that in movies or in real life. And we stand and we sit and we bow. And so we chant lauds, and then we have Mass. At the Mother House, we have Mass right there in our chapel. On missions, which is what we are here, we'll usually go to a parish for Mass, or at Society Catholic, we have Mass at our school chapel before school. And then if we're teachers, which most of us are, then we have breakfast, short breakfast, and then we go to school. And at school, we're just normal teachers like everybody else. We chaperone dances, we grade papers, we do all those things. Then we come home from school and we have half an hour or an hour of normally free time. So one of us will be cooking dinner. We might have extra prayer time. So we have optional adoration time at 4:30. We might go for a walk. We might grade papers, write lesson plans, because we make our own habits. Then we go back to chapel for evening prayer, which we also sing. Then we pray the rosary together. Then we go to dinner, and our meals are in silence. So we eat, and then we listen to a book on tape or like a talk that a priest or a theologian gave. So we're being fed body and spirit while we eat. Then we clean up, and then we have an hour of recreation where we sit and visit, or we play board games. So Father Wayne and I were talking about some of the games that we like to play. So depending on the group of sisters, you might do different things. Sometimes you might go for a walk. And then we go back to chapel for Compline, night prayer. And we also have a time of spiritual reading, which is just our individual reading time. And then after that, around 8:10, it's more normally free time, but it's also silence. So there's no talking. And that's a time for us to pray more, grade papers, do lesson plans. And then 10 o'clock is what we call profound silence. So at profound silence, all the sisters are in, okay, get ready for this, we're in our cells. So, I know. So, there's something called a monastic cell, which just means a small room, a small, simple room. And I'm pretty sure that we had the word first before jails.
Not before jails, at least before phones.
Okay, that's true. Yeah. So it's just this small space. And for us, because we're monastic, in our monastic cells, nobody else but us goes. So nobody's coming in like, hey, how's your day? Like it's totally silent always. And nobody else goes in. There's never any technology, right? It's just a space. Usually, like for us, there's like a bed, a desk, a dresser, and that's pretty much it. And it's not like decorated, right? It's just simple. And that's our place to pray, to be with the Lord, to study. So for Dominicans, study is a big part of our life, so to study, and to rest. So that's the end of our day, and then we do it again. So that's a day in the life of a Dominican Sister of St. Cecilia. Saturdays and Sundays, we sleep in until 6. So yes, it's up tomorrow. Very excited. Yes. Maybe. Yes. Go ahead.
I was just gonna ask what you do during the summer when there's no school.
Yes. So during the summer, that depends on what we're asked to do in obedience. So we can be asked to do all kinds of things. A lot of the sisters are asked to study, so they'll go to graduate school and different universities around the country. So Sister and I have both done that. You go like several summers in a row to get your degree. Other sisters go to like Catholic camps. So some sisters go to Cove Crest, if you've heard of Cove Crest. Vacation Bible schools sometimes we help out with. So people just ask us to come and help with things. So then you'll just see your name and you're like, oh, I'm going this place. And then you go there. Or like I was asked to teach summer school at Presiding Catholic, so I taught some philosophy classes this summer. Sometimes we might be at the mother house, helping in the kitchen, helping in the laundry, helping to keep the grounds. So the mother house, which for us is in Nashville, is a really huge building with like 150, 200 sisters there. So it takes a lot of work just to keep that running, and we are the ones that do that work. So, we might be doing that. So it's, we're doing a combination of those things. So it's kind of a adventure time. We also visit our families during the summer, often, for a week. So that also happens in the summer. Any other questions? Okay, well, great. And we'll be here for a little longer, so if you have any individual questions.
Thank you, sister.
Thank you.